She accused me of spying on her. Our smart home recorded the nights she wanted me blind. Until I realized what she was really hiding, that if you ask people what makes for a healthy marriage, you'll hear words like trust, communication, and maybe space. I spent most of my life thinking these were just cliché answers in relationship quizzes, until I realized sometimes having too much trust blinds you more than any suspicion ever could. My name is Anton. I'm 41. On paper, I've always looked diligent, level-headed, responsible. Maybe a little too rational, as Paulina, my wife, liked to tease. We met when I was 29, she was 23, in a courthouse, fitting for a lawyer and a marketing student with jury duty. 7 years we have been together, 6 living in this two-bedroom apartment on the city's edge, with a 10-minute walk to the train and the perpetual promise of one day finally getting a dog. I work as a corporate lawyer for a tech firm, a world of contracts, digital rights, NDAs, non-competes, cases loaded with metadata. Funny how you can spend your career safeguarding secrets for others and never once question whether you've missed something vital at home. Our apartment was a smart home before that phrase became a meme. Nest hubs, Wi-Fi bulbs, motion sensors, an always-on video doorbell, a digital lock that sent a push notification whenever anyone came in or out. Not because I was paranoid, I just liked convenience, automating those little annoyances. Paulina made jokes about living in a spaceship for introverts. Truth be told, I thought the tech was more for her. She hated dark corridors, loved checking if the stove was off from her phone. The only thing we ever disagreed on was the guest mode. I always kept an admin password nobody else had. She worked more and more in the past year. Agency life, she'd sigh, slinging her laptop bag over her shoulder, perfume lingering long after she left. Several nights a week, group video calls ran late, followed by drinks with clients or team nights. I tried to be a supportive husband, ordered food, tracked her location only for safety, sent her loving emoji. But sometimes midnight would come and go with just a single text. Don't wait up. Arguments snuck in like cold drafts, minor things, sharp and stupid. She would joke in front of friends. Anton has a camera for everything. He'd probably record his own dreams if he could. Everyone would laugh, and I would smile, but it stung sometimes. At first, I didn't see what was changing. She'd flinch if I entered the room while she was texting. Once, friends came over for dinner, and I overheard her say, "He's sweet, but all this tech, sometimes it feels like living under surveillance." I reasoned it away. She just needed more freedom. I was overthinking every gesture, every complaint. Sometimes she'd come home smelling like a different cologne, but that was office culture, right? And still, every so often, I'd browse the access logs from the smart door lock and notice subtle patterns. A guest code, used at 2 a.m., or the living room camera blinking off at strange hours for cleaning, she'd say with a faint smile. I never accused her, never pressed. I saw myself as above jealousy. I had the facts, the logs, the digital paper trail. Besides, Paulina was right. Trust was the air you breathed, not a document to sign. But sometimes, lying alone after she'd gone out for yet another after-work drink, I'd wonder why trust felt less like oxygen and more like a hole you never stopped falling through. Most marital cracks don't start with shouts. They start small, missed glances, withheld words, a laugh that sounds too forced. By the start of spring, our apartment felt like it had more ghosts than furniture. One Friday night, Paulina came home late. Not missed the last train, late, but the kind where dawn stained her forehead in the hallway mirror. I was awake, but pretended not to be. She slipped into the shower, then slid into bed, her body taut as a bridge cable. I almost reached out, almost asked. Didn't. Instead, I watched her shoulders rise and fall, counted 16 breaths, and went to make coffee I didn't want. A week later, it happened again. The same exhaustion in her voice, the same silence at dinner. Long week, she mumbled, barely looking at me. I told myself to let her be. I had always loathed the men who went through their wives' phones. I refused to become one. But the urge was there, thrumming beneath my professionalism. It was on a Sunday when the first real fight broke out. We'd planned a movie night. She arrived home at 9, carrying a new bottle of Chardonnay, cheeks flushed with something that didn't feel like city breeze. I'd already set up the projector, the living room dim and ready. "You track everything I do," Paulina blurted suddenly. dropping her bag so hard the kitchen table rattled. She spoke loudly, too loudly, like she wanted someone in the next building to hear. Everywhere I go, there's always a camera, a notification, an app. You even check the front door logs. What? Do you print my schedule too? I try to keep my voice level. Paulina, those are for safety. You have all the same access. If you want to turn things off, it's not about turning them off. It's that you want me to feel watched. Like it's your little court case, and I'm the accused. You're controlling. You can't help yourself. She stalked past me, the wine unopened on the table. The worst part was, I knew how this would sound, to her friends, to anyone. The man with the gadgets, the lawyer husband, suffocating his wife with his need for evidence. Maybe it was true. Maybe I did build a house of censors to watch over what I couldn't express. We barely spoke for 3 days. Each night, she worked later, called more, taxi rides with colleagues. For the first time in years, she locked her phone with a code I didn't know. I only realized this when she asked me to charge it for her, then snatched it out of my hands, cheeks burning. In my quieter moments, I tried to remember when we last laughed together or shared something unforced. Couldn't find it. By mid-April, Paulina had gone from quiet irritation to Cold War. She moved quietly through the apartment, spent more time on the balcony for calls, started mentioning old friends from her university days. Mostly one, Arkady. Arkasa just listens, you know? He never tells me how to feel. Sometimes I wish you could do that. Our lives divided further, 2 flats under one roof. I slept less, distracted at work, missed appointments. Each night, the same routines repeated. She'd vanish to another room, and I'd scroll our smart home logs, more out of anxiety than distrust. What was I looking for? I didn't know. Maybe evidence, maybe a reason to stop looking. That's when, one night, noticing another guest code entry at 1:17 a.m. while I was on a business trip, something in me changed. Rationalizing had just become another way to ignore the obvious. Law school taught me, when two stories start to diverge, always go to the records. I opened a new folder on my laptop, home underscore under for review. I set up backup automation for every device in the apartment. Noticed the obvious patterns I'd missed. Guest entries matching her girls' nights. Front door video briefly disabled in those exact hours. Unfamiliar Bluetooth devices detected by the living room hub. A phone never registered under our accounts. I told myself it was only for peace of mind, but it no longer felt like peace had anything to do with it. Once you decide to treat your own life as a case, something inside you is lost for good. For nearly a month, I became two people, the husband who smiled politely over takeout dinners, and the litigator moving files to encrypted cloud storage every night. My heart had shrunk down to the size of a micro SD card. The technical work came easily. Years of corporate disputes, compliance audits, and arbitration requests had taught me the importance of structured evidence. I built a timeline spreadsheet, smart lock activations, Bluetooth logs, camera on-off patterns, tracked against Paulina's girls' nights, each suspicious event color-coded. I combed router logs for unfamiliar device IDs, flagged every instance my home server registered with a strange MAC address at odd hours. Paulina began to sense something had shifted. She kept her circles tighter, made fewer jokes, but the barbs were sharper. You'll drag me into a courtroom one day, just so you can win. Once, I almost replied, only if you force my hand, but I swallowed the words, logged the date. Late one Friday, as she slept, I reviewed saved video clips from our doorbell. I noticed gaps. 3 times in the past month, the doorbell had been offline for updates between midnight and 3 a.m. I checked the system logs. Updates had, in fact, been scheduled, but manually triggered from the living room app. The only other person with access was Paulina herself. Further, guest codes from the smart lock told their own story. One code, ending in 32, was never used by cleaners or friends. It matched the same windows as the camera outages. I exported the entries, nights when I was away, or when her colleagues called late. I cross-referenced these with her calendar, shared for years, although she'd recently begun hiding events as private. On a hunch, I checked archived router logs and ran a script to match login times with device fingerprints. An iPhone 13, unknown to either of us, popped up 3 times, always in tandem with the lock and camera anomalies. Mentally, I tried and retried every possible innocent explanation. Sleep deprivation, overlaps, Random guests. All failed the Occam's razor I'd spent my life depending on. I printed reports, screenshots, log extracts, stored digital copies under multiple encrypted passwords, one at work, one offline, one in my cloud. I wrote brief summaries for every incident, careful to avoid emotional commentary. No accusation, just facts. If my hands shook while typing, I pretended not to notice. Then, almost too perfectly, came the confrontation. One evening, I came home early. Paulina was sitting in the kitchen, phone in hand, glass of something on the table. She watched me as I entered, not blinking. "Anton," she said, voice flat, "I know you're digging. I know you've been spying. I haven't done anything. But if you don't stop, I'll have to tell people how controlling you are. You wouldn't want your precious firm hearing about your little obsessions, would you?" It was a well-practiced speech. She'd been working up to it, rehearsing for a sympathetic audience. I felt a strange, empty calm. I answered, "We're both entitled to privacy, Paulina, but not entitled to double lives. If there's something you need to say, now's the time." She stared at me, searching for something, weakness, maybe, or anger. Finding none, she laughed, a high brittle sound, and stormed out to the balcony to call someone. Moments later, doors slammed. As she talked with someone outside, "No, he's doing it again. It's like living in a police state." "No, I'm fine, but I'll need to stay with you if he starts." I recorded the time, the exchanges, the words. Then I consulted with a colleague, trusted, discreet, with experience in family mediation. She listened quietly as I explained, never asking about my feelings, just the sequence of facts. Her advice was brutally professional. "You have everything you need. Document, don't escalate. If she accuses you or tries to manufacture a conflict, get a legal witness. Do not be alone with her if you feel unsafe." I spent the following night sleeping in the guest room, door locked, voice recorder always running. Every conversation was logged, every argument timestamped. At work, I locked away all devices, password every account. I updated my will, wrote a letter, just in case, for my parents. Days blurred. At group dinners, friends watched me with careful neutrality. News and rumors were already spreading. I caught odd glances, heard hesitant interrogations. "Is everything all right at home?" Paulina seems tense lately. Always I smiled. "Just work stress." Inside, anxiety simmered. I knew that soon the next move would come from her. The unraveling, when it came, was not cinematic. There was no final confrontation with confessions and recrimination. Only bureaucratic processes, bland legal letters, and cold, neutral rooms filled with professionals paid to witness the end of a marriage. After my colleague's discreet consultation, I brought all evidence, printed logs, camera screenshots, router records, annotated call histories, to a trusted family law partner in another firm. She read through everything in silence, marking passages as I spoke. "You've prepared more thoroughly than most," she said. "But you need to prepare for the emotional fallout too. Get ahead of the false narrative. Let your firm's HR know you anticipate accusations." That day, I filed a formal memo through the compliance channel, stating I was facing personal conflict and had taken every possible step to preserve privacy and boundaries. It was the smart home, in the end, that proved both my protection and my curse. The carefully time-stamped entries, the off cycles for cameras, the overlapping guest codes, all told a quiet truth impossible to dismiss or spin. Paulina must have realized this, because within a week of our last icy exchange, she moved most of her things out. There was no speech, no apology. She left a note in the entryway for sentences about needing space and not feeling safe under scrutiny. She told our mutual friends she'd endured years of surveillance and distrust. Some believed her, some didn't. My inbox began to fill with cautious, ambiguous messages. "I hope you both find peace. Just checking if you're okay. Tell your side when you're ready." She said some intense things, Anton. "Should we talk?" I never replied to most. I had no energy left to defend my version. The log said all that mattered. I moved out for a month while she formally filed separation paperwork, coordinating through lawyers. We divided assets by the letter of the contract. There were no public scenes. Everything happened in email threads, annotated by paralegals and CC'd to HR, insurance, the bank. My signature became an automatic gesture, proof of life rather than meaning. Formally, I won. No claims against me were ever registered. The technology that once brought us together became the shield that kept her stories from sticking, receipts, logs, audit trails. In one brief meeting with her attorney and, separately, the police, who had only a perfunctory welfare check call, my files quietly preempted any claim of harassment or threat. But the price surprised me. Friends from her side evaporated overnight. A few old colleagues began avoiding me in the office kitchen. Invitations shrank. Every social event felt like an open cross-examination in which I was always a possible defendant. My parents, practical but worried, phoned every day, offering unhelpful advice about starting over. I took up jogging, then abandoned it as soon as I discovered how long and lonely the evenings had become. Therapy was a slow revelation. The first sessions, all I could talk about were facts and processes, server logs, alarm timestamps, time zones, and metadata. My therapist listened, gently steering me away from timelines to feelings I didn't want to address: betrayal, grief, humiliation, the hollow reward of being right. Slowly, the rituals faded. I stopped checking logs for patterns, deleted redundant backups, let the guest code expire in the smart lock. Some nights, I still found my mind spinning through old routines. Where was she? What did the door see? But I forced myself to write it out in paper journals, just once, then closed the cover. Months passed. The apartment was emptier, lighter. I rearranged the furniture, hung different prints on the walls. I learned to eat alone, to spend weekends reading for pleasure, not for escape. Once, a friend asked me for advice about a smart home setup. I found myself hesitating before saying, "Don't automate what you aren't ready to lose." The gossip faded. Her name came up less. Newer scars replaced the old ones in our circles. Work became just work again. When people now ask, sometimes tentatively, sometimes prying, "What happened?" I give the only honest answer I have. We had too many secrets and too many ways to prove them. Eventually, the evidence mattered more than the trust ever did. I know that next time, if there is one, I'll be slower to trust blind reliance on facts, slower to hand over the technical keys to my peace. Maybe a little less sure, but, in a strange way, more free. The tech outlived the marriage, but now, at least, I remember to look for the quietly human moments between the lines of data. Truth is heavy, but in the end, it's mine to carry, not to use as a weapon.